Welcome to Inside the Leader's Mind, where what's in the way becomes the way. I'm your host, David Suson, and I am excited for my guest today because, most health technology asks us to do something new. Wear a device, charge it, download, open an app, remember to check it. Today's guest is helping build technology around something people already do every day: sit on the toilet. What? Yeah. Olivia Lew is the CEO of Casana, creator of the Smart Seat, a toilet seat designed to monitor important health information without cameras, microphones, nothing to wear. But this conversation is about much more than just an unusual product. Olivia grew up surrounded by medicine, became a healthcare investor, and then left the investor side of the table to help build one of the companies she had backed. Today, we're going to go inside her mind to explore healthcare, human behavior, risk, and what it really takes to turn a promising idea into something that could help people remain independent longer. Olivia Lew, welcome to Inside the Leader's Mind.
Oh, David, and thank you for having me today. I'm excited to be here with you.
Well, I always do a prep call with all my guests just to get to know them a little bit, build a little rapport. And I was just fascinated. So a couple things that you shared with me. I know you grew up on Martha's Vineyard, right? With two doctors as parents, and your father delivered generations of babies on the island.
That's right. The only OBGYN for almost 40 years.
That is crazy. I think that's a monopoly. But anyway, he was
the first one. They had a trouble convincing an OBGYN to move and build their practice on Martha's Vineyard. This is before it's, what it is today.
Right. Well, what did growing up that close to medicine allow you to see that most children never saw?
Yeah. I think it starts at the dinner table conversation where I would hear stories of what happened in the day, the frustrations with the evolution to electronic medical records, the stories of how my dad would be helping patients and need to run from, birthday parties into the office to help somebody who needed attention or a delivery, and just seeing how it was our whole world in our house of, just listening to what was happening in his life and in his work. And my mom did not end up practicing in the US. She was a clinician in France where she was practicing. And then when she moved to the US to be with my dad and start a family, she ended up not going back to residency to practice here.
And raising the family. So was your dad kind of like a celebrity in a way? Like when you went around
everybody would be so excited to see him and introduce him to their children, saying, "This is the guy who brought you into the world." And that was awesome, but it was also embarrassing as a kid. Sometimes my sisters and I would be like, "Oh man," but very rewarding. And if we were on vacation, mothers would say, "And Dr. Lew was on vacation, and so he didn't get to deliver you," and because he'd have to pay a doctor to come over to the island from Boston to cover for him.
So, and with both parents being doctors, they discouraged you and your siblings from becoming doctors because They believed the healthcare system was broken. Is that right?
I think just so much frustration with the system as it was evolving over time. What started as a practice that, you go into because you really want to help others and make a change in people's lives. And then over time it becoming, political and about billing and just shifting the focus from why people get into medicine in the first place. And I think a lot of clinicians struggle with this. Time limits with patients and all of the restrictions now that are built on to the system, unfortunately. And so I think, my parents were like, "Oh, if you really want to go into medicine, but there's probably a lot of other fields out there where you can make change and have a positive impact." So they tried to discourage us from going into the field.
So what did hearing that plant in you?
I think as is always, and now I'm trying to remember this as I raise my own 3 children. Be careful, because when you say no, it's exactly what they want to do. And so I've always felt drawn to the healthcare system and trying to figure out how can I help transform the system in a little way, at least to discourage others from being discouraged, I guess. So to encourage others and make the system better so that others would want to participate in it, again, for the reasons that people want to go into medicine to do good care.
So initially, as I recall, you really tried to make a difference through nonprofit work, right?
That's right.
But as you said, you got frustrated by how dependent that work is on fundraising.
Yeah,
right?
and it's not all nonprofits, but many nonprofits, unfortunately, are just so dependent on funders and the whim of funders, and don't have a structure to be sustainable without just more fundraising dollars coming in at all times. And so we ended up at one of the nonprofits that I was working for in San Francisco. We ended up shutting down one of the programs because a funder just changed their whim that year on what they wanted to fund. And that seemed so unsustainable to me. And so mentors at the time said, you can still do good in the world with other models. It doesn't have to be the nonprofit model. And again, not all nonprofits are built on, unsustainable models, or so dependent models. But I went to business school as a result to learn new models of how to make change.
So that's what prompted that, right?
Yeah. And for me, it was, growing up in a bilingual household, it was I learned a new language. So that was it was a framework that I already had in my mind. You learn a language to be able to communicate with new people. And I grew up in a French household. I could communicate with people when we went to visit my grandmother in France. And now after going to business school, all of a sudden I could communicate with this whole sector of our society that I didn't have a language to participate in before. So it was very eye-opening for me and helpful.
That's a really cool and motivation to learn, the language of business, right?
Exactly.
So you mentioned to me, and I wanted to ask you about this. You end up connecting with someone that you had nannied for, right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that and what happened. And I don't want to mention names unless you care to.
No, I'm comfortable talking about it. So yeah, you just never know where the world reconnects you with folks from history. And I think one of the lessons for me was just, and that I share with others as they're starting their careers, you never know who can help you or be who you can help. And a network is so valuable to keep involved and engaged throughout your life, even checking in on folks. So when I was on Martha's Vineyard, I had the opportunity to nanny for 2 summers in a row for a family who was the dad was David Fialco. David Fialco was the founder of General Catalyst, which is an investment firm now global, but was based here in the Boston area where I am. And almost 15 years later, I came back to him, realizing he had started this venture firm. After I had been to business school, I was a management consultant. I had done the nonprofit thing, and then we moved to Boston, and I saw that he was in Boston. I reached out and I said, "Do you have ideas? I'm looking for my next gig." And he said, "I have a better idea." He said, "Yeah, I have lots of ideas." And then he paused and because he was whiteboarding all of the companies that they worked with at General Catalyst. He was very helpful. And then he said, "I have a better idea. Why don't you be my chief of staff?" And so I spent my first year back in Boston just being eyes and ears with David in meetings and being exposed to the ecosystem here in Boston, which was an incredible opportunity.
Okay, so hang on. You're a nanny for 2 summers.
You never know where life goes, right?
15 years later. Now, had you been in touch over those 15 years?
Really? No. I mean, maybe through...
Like, were they best friends of your... Were they
no,
best friends
not
with your
even.
mom
No,
and dad?
no.
So you just nanny, you get this nanny job.
I mean, the island is small. So they're in the world of the networks. Yeah, for sure.
But 15 years later, just from nannying for 2 summers, you reach out to this guy and he's like, "You know what? I want to help you, become my chief of staff."
I was a very good nanny.
You must have been a
but it's not just
nanny.
that, though. Let me tell you how I tell this story also, because so the venture capital world is built on trust. And is there anyone that you trust more than somebody that you bring into your home and leave with your children for days on end? No. So we had that foundation of like, hey, there's a basis of trust that we already started with. And this, again, like that is such an important asset or, trait in the venture world. And after that year of being his chief of staff, I had my original intention was to go work for a company, which I ended up doing. That's where we are now. I am now. But he said, I think you have a knack for the investment side, for the finance side, and it's true. It is the most fun opportunity. And when you have fun doing work, you work harder, smarter, faster sometimes. And so I shifted over to his early stage investment team where I focused on the intersection of software and healthcare here in the Boston area primarily. And that was for almost 4 years after
That was
the
really
chief
cool.
of
Now,
staff
before
role.
I go to the next move forward from that, I just want to make a point to people who are listening right now how big a deal this is, because you never know who you're going to meet. You
Exactly
never
right.
know who you've met. You never know who they know. And I don't care how old you are. I don't care if you're in your 80s. I don't care if you're 20, 15, or you have kids. How important it is to every person you meet could change your life. And that's my PSA today, because I travel around the world, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, 2,000 flights. I've been in 400 cities in the US, right? It's amazing. And I was adding up how many people I've met face to face, not just doing a
Mm.
keynote. You got a couple thousand people. That doesn't
Yeah, yeah,
count.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking one-on-one. And the number of times I get hired, the number of connections I make, and I'm not saying this to boast about myself. I'm saying for those of you listening, you never know. You
Yeah.
never know who you're going to meet. You never know what the impact is. Be kind to everyone.
Yeah.
Stay in touch with people.
And
Make an
help and
impact
offer to help. I think that's
and
the
help
other thing.
them.
It's not just about you,
It's
right?
it's not about you. It's
That's right.
not about you. It's about them. Yeah,
That's right.
make it
And
about
and
them.
see
Yeah.
how you can be helpful because you don't know either how helpful, some of your connections or who knows, but just having that open mind, I think is really, and the prepared mindset, as you're saying, of just like this person, I'm going to call you, David, in 2 years and who knows, but this is exactly, this is why it's fun because who knows? There's going to be something I can help you or you can help me. And now we've built the foundation.
Just a quick side note before we move on. It's not just about tit for tat. It's not about quid pro quo. It's really create human connection,
Yeah.
period, with
Yeah.
no ulterior motive than to be interested and fascinated by other people. And be a help. Be a
Yeah.
help. So anyway, all right, that's my soapbox for today. So you've, all right, you've seen a lot of
Is it the
intelligent.
only one or you'll come back?
Yeah, I'll come back. You saw a lot of intelligent entrepreneurs and probably impressive ideas. From your experience doing that, what separated the leaders you genuinely believed could build something from those who simply presented well?
Yeah. I think one thing we look for is what's the itch? What keeps them motivated? Why is this building a company is so hard? Let me start there, right? It takes time. It's so exhausting. It's lonely. But if there's something that is just itching them to solve this problem, or, I don't know the right word. It's lost on me, but, that they can't shake, that you just know they have to do this. And you see that when they're talking about the problem statement or why they've chosen to solve this. And you can sense when somebody's talking about what they're doing that there's the depth of understanding and the connection that they have to needing to do this is something I would always look for. And it's not always obvious. It's not, sometimes there was an entrepreneur we worked with who had already been a very successful entrepreneur and didn't have a personal connection to the next company, but they had to do it because they wanted to make sure they weren't a one-hit wonder. That's a very deep question that person, they were going to do whatever because they wanted to prove to the world that it wasn't lucky. So there's something that you have to figure out. What is it is there something that, or are they just doing it, to start a company? I think that's one example of something I would look for.
That's fascinating. That's interesting. Now, while studying technology for older adults, because I want to move into kind of where you're at now,
Yep.
my understanding is you notice that many products ask people to wear something or charge something or remember to do something. So at the time, many companies had blamed, especially in older adults, low adoption on the fact that they are older and that they're uncomfortable with technology. Tell me about that and how you came to a different conclusion.
Yeah. So one of the models that General Catalyst employs is or at the time, it was an executive in residence partnership. So we would bring in an executive. So in this case, it was Jeff Leiden, who was the CEO of Vertex Pharmaceuticals. And we brought in an executive to pair up with an investor to go find a deal to invest in work on a thesis, find a deal, and then the executive in residence would become the chair of the board and mentor the CEO based on their background expertise. And the goal was to surround our CEOs with folks like Jeff Leiden and others, just the top of their field who could be helpful to these new companies. So Jeff and I were working on this thesis for elderly care, and it wasn't a lack of startups or new technologies that were trying to solve problems and trying to bring new solutions to the aging marketplace. But what most folks, the biggest adoption, and this is what you mentioned too, the highest adoption of technology at that point, and still is, I believe, is the PERS devices. I've fallen, I can't get up, right? But those are decades old. I mean, those have been around, and there's been lots of innovation since then, but low adoption. So, as you mentioned, the folks would point to digital literacy. Oh, older people don't like technology, and although there's some truth to that, but what we discovered is that there's another layer that is at a certain point in your life, and people probably hit this at different points, and some people just feel this way at any point, but adding another thing to your list to remember to wear and to charge and to do is not as helpful as, I think we see a lot of these wearables, for example, providing so much data because people are interested in knowing like the minutia of, if I walk 5 steps, what does it look like? And at every single point. And I think when we met this toilet seat company, there was such an aha moment for us of, wow, there's a way to collect data and listen to what your body's saying and know if something is trending in the wrong direction by just setting it in the background. And that seemed brilliant to us. And so we invested in Casana. This was 5.5 years ago, and we've been working on it ever since.
So is it the fact that you saw in this product that they didn't have to do anything? They literally, and we're going to talk about this in a minute because I want to hear more about it, but literally all they do is sit down.
Yeah.
Is that what prompted you to go, oh my gosh, look at the data. Okay. So for someone who's hearing about the smart seat, Casana smart seat for the first time, help us understand what it does.
Great. So this is a toilet seat that first and foremost, it operates just like any other toilet seat. So it has 2 bolts in the back. This is an interesting fact about our country is that we actually have 2 standard size toilet seats in our country, something we all agree on. Either you have a round toilet seat or an elongated toilet seat, and they all have the same bolts in the back. And so it's a very easy install. So you just put the bolts underneath. Within a few minutes, you can put the seat and connect it. And then this inside the seat is what's interesting and different than a normal toilet seat. So we have inside the seat is embedded batteries, or batteries in the back, so that you don't have to charge it. It should last about 2 years, and you don't plug it in. It just it'll work on its own. And then we have 3 different sensors in the seat. So the first is 2 EKG electrodes on either side of the seat, and that measures the electrical activity of your heart when you sit down. And that was fun to hear the origin story of Nick Kahn, our founder. When he first came up with this idea, he strapped EKG electrodes to his thighs and said, okay, let's see if this is possible. And he looked up at the screen and he could see his EKG because, it's far from the heart, as we know. So that was the first kind of prototype, was just these electrodes. And then as he began to iterate, he also added a photoplasmogram. So this is the pulse oximeters. It's the sensor inside the pulse oximeters that became popular during COVID, and that it measures the absorption of light through your skin. And so we have that on the front left of the seat. And then in the bumpers, we have really sensitive scales. And so those are load cells inside the bumpers that give us a sensor, a measure called the ballistocardiogram. And it's the combination of these 3 sensors that is sent up through encrypted methods to the cloud. And then on an app, you can see the features that are predicted from the sensors. So what do we measure? We measure heart rate variability, respiratory rate, blood oxygenation, blood pressure insights from the 3 sensors. We have a stand-up power metric, which shows how strong and stable are you coming off of the seat. That hopefully will really be helpful for folks as they age to see how that evolves. Bathroom patterns. So interestingly, we'll see how when your patterns change, how that might impact something happening that you need to pay attention to.
UTI.
Exactly. We just heard a story from a customer this week that she shared that her doctor had been asking her to track her nighttime bathroom usage, and she just had been having the hardest time remembering or writing down in the middle of the night how many times she was going to the bathroom. And she just took an export of the seat data, and she was like, that was so easy and so helpful. So that was really great. Just use case example.
It's funny. I shared your story with my wife. So my wife had cared for her aging mom for 5 years full time. She was in a wheelchair, and we had to go buy a scale that you could roll your wheelchair on. She had to weigh her every day to monitor weight, because all of a sudden she gains 10 pounds, and that's a red flag of fluid retention. And we would have to help her get on and off the toilet. And so I was sharing this with my wife, so practicality, and she's like, oh my gosh, I wish we would have had that. Because before the final year, she was able to scoot herself on and off the toilet herself. But if we were out of the house for a couple of hours, right, without cameras, we don't have cameras in the bathroom, to be able to monitor if she went to the toilet, if she's still on the toilet, if there was some incident that happened on the toilet, right? Or, numerous UTIs, right? Weight gain, fluid retention, constantly pulse ox. I mean, everything you do that. And my wife was like, oh my God, that would have made my life as a full-time caregiver so much better and predictive. And my wife was over the top. I don't want to say compared to others, because I don't know others, but for someone who's not in the house, not that, diligent, there could be, like, I just see because I dealt with this too, right? Being in the house, she was in our house. I just see the impact it would have had in our life. It could have been huge.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. And I think we see that this relationship between caregivers and users of the device can be really valuable. Proof of life is one example that we hear could be helpful, of just they went to the bathroom. But to all the ways that you were just talking, I think we have the way it works is that the app can also be shared if the user wants to with loved ones, so that there can be a connection and awareness of what's going on.
That's huge. That even for us. I mean, there's watches and stuff, but we dealt with the same thing. It's like another thing to charge, another thing to make sure that it's actually on and she doesn't take it off, and it's on tight enough, and it's not causing a rash. And I mean, because, it just, with elder, there's so many other variables. This could have been huge. What has building technology around the people already behave taught you about human nature?
We are creatures of habit. And so what we've seen, I'll give an example from our company, is we see that people have very habitual, and we know this, right? We're creatures of habit, but patterns, and it's the deviations from those patterns that actually can be very helpful to understanding what's going on. I think also another work that we're thinking around is, and a lot of folks around wearables are talking about this, just there's so much data now that we're collecting, which is awesome, because this is a whole bolus of data that we didn't have, this home continuous longitudinal data about our bodies. I don't think this is just inning one. I don't think anybody actually wants to look at all this data. But what we'll be able to do is distill new insights and new, partnering with the clinical system, new ways of helping people detect anything earlier. So that I think that there's going to be this evolution of responding to data. I think right now, we're seeing with human nature, it's like, especially a lot of the younger athletic folks who are using wearables, it's like, they want to see more and more data. But actually what we're really trying to do is distill what's most important to pay attention to, so that we can flag things earlier.
And it's not just the data, it's what the data is really telling us.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's exactly right.
So you're now leading the company, is that correct?
That's right.
And company has had a marketable on the market product for how long now?
6 days. We just launched last Tuesday, and it's so exciting. We're so excited to be
Let's
here.
say that again. As of this recording, the
That's
product just launched 6 days ago. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank
I
you.
mean, that's
No, huge.
amazing.
And I think what we have to remind ourselves is, we know this from a lot of people are shy to invest on the venture capital side from hardware because it does add a whole nother level of challenge and, effort and what's required to build a business that also has hardware. We are a data company, but we do have a hardware component to us to being successful. And I think what's really important with our launch here at Casana is that we are grounded in 10 years of clinical studies and research. And so we really spent the time to make sure that the numbers that we are providing, meet the standards that we've set for ourselves. We are a wellness device under the new wellness guidance from the FDA that was published in January, and that's our history. That's where we have
That's
come.
amazing. So really, it's an overnight success.
That's exactly
That only took 10 years. So what is it like? So let's get inside the leader's mind here. As the leader of the company right now, I always like to break out, we've got operational challenges, we have the human side. On the human side, what do you see as the biggest challenge being a leader today in your organization? We can't speak for others, but in yours.
Yeah, for us, I think launching a product is always very exciting and very scary. We've felt that this product can help a lot of people. We believe that it will, but now it's the wait and see, who buys this, do they like it? And I think balancing our own team's excitement and fear in a way of just, how do we make sure that they like it and how do we stay motivated through this? And so I think there's a lot of emotion around launch that we're all working through together. We're an 18-person team right now. Yeah, so balancing those two.
And is this before you were doing consulting work, right? You were
Yeah.
working in there. Now you're leading a team. How is it different for you from what you expected?
Yeah.
Actually managing people, leading people
Very
versus being an
different.
independent. Yeah.
I think the consulting life is that you pop in and out, right? And you do an intense work with a team, a piece of work where you deliver it and then you remove yourself. But here we do the work, we do intense projects and then it's still us. We're still here to take it the next one, right? And so you kind of live with your decisions in a very different way. That's both, terrorizing, fear. It's scary and it's really awesome because you get to see the upside of it too.
And over the years that you've been in business, one of the things that I always like to ask about now is trends in people, like what you used to work with and what you're working with today. What do you notice in trends? And maybe it depends on the age of the people on your team. But what have you noticed?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing now is trying to understand how do we make sure that we create a culture in our company in a remote model or hybrid model. It used to be a lot easier, I think, when we were all in the office 5 days a week because we would easier in the sense of like we would see, right? You see, okay, this is how you look how hard they're working. I better work that hard. Or, you watch for company norms, you watch for signals that it's a little harder to pick up on in a remote or hybrid, but we're mostly remote environment. I think that for me, that's the biggest evolution piece, especially for young people, because those of us who had the opportunity to start our careers in a non-remote world we still remember kind of those pieces that we can, match to our new environment. But when you're just coming out of school and don't have those anchors, it's really interesting to try to figure out how do we instill that work ethic and some of the cultural norms here over Zoom.
Yeah, that can be tough. Do you have any secrets for people? What's worked for you really well that others might look at and say, what can I learn from you on this? Any ideas?
Nothing new. I mean, we spend the time and dollars to bring everyone together once, twice a year, and then teams together more than that. And then, what we do try to do is spend time to get to know each other. And so, we just did a round of Two Truths and a Lie, a series over our all hands just to get people, force a little bit more connection beyond the Zoom meeting itself.
I love that. I think it's great to build that personal connection because people don't realize the value of human connection in person. It's walking down the hall or taking a minute to walk by and you see, they have a new picture on their desk and then it creates that connection. But in remote, the problem is get on the call, we get the work done and get off. And so you don't have the connection at work.
Yeah.
What do you find in today's world compared to what it was for you? Biggest key to really motivating, keeping people motivated, keeping them engaged so that they want to give their all.
Yeah.
Either the challenge or secret for you
I think
to
the
doing
biggest, the first thing that comes to mind is a lesson that I learned from actually David Fialco at General Catalyst, who would remind me going into all of his meetings, even when I was chief of staff for him, is everyone seeks relevancy. Everyone needs to feel, and I think another word that a lot of people use for this is purpose, right? But it's making sure that people feel that their work or know how their work is meaningful. Why just giving somebody a task without explaining and helping them understand, like, hey, this is how it fits in the big puzzle, and this is why it's like very important that this is done well. So I try to lean in to reminding folks how their work is relevant, how they are relevant to the big picture of what we're doing. Yeah, that would be the first thing that comes to mind.
I love that. I think it's really cool. And let me ask you, through the years, so the podcast is called Inside the Leader's Mind, and that the tagline is what's in the way becomes the way. Because sometimes the thing that's in the way in our life, we had to go around it, and that put us where we are, or we went through it. When you look at your, I don't know if I want to say career, maybe it's just Casana, but wherever you want to choose to share this, what is something that has been in your way that was a big obstacle somewhere that actually became the way for you?
Yeah, that's a good one. For me, I'm not afraid to ask for help. And what was in the way is I don't feel like I have all the answers, and I don't have all the answers. And I think a lot of leaders feel like especially new leaders, feel like they need to have all the answers. I think what I've learned is, make decisions is really important. So don't shy away from making decisions and standing by those decisions and then course correct as needed. But it's also okay to, as we called it, share the dilemma. It's okay not to know the answers. Go find folks to share the dilemma with, in my network, and who maybe I think could be helpful in a particular area that I'm trying to solve something in. And it's okay not to have all the answers, but you got to figure it out. So, knowing who to talk to, and it goes back to network, like we were starting the conversation, is like building that group of folks around you who you can tag has been how I have found a way through not knowing all the answers myself, especially early leadership days.
I love that. And I love the very first thing you said about make a decision, right? One of the things that I always tell the clients I coach, the executives I coach, or when I speak, I said, the number one key. So I've interviewed literally thousands of leaders over the years.
Yeah.
And the number one secret I've seen of the best leaders is they're decisive. And what I've learned is no one wants to follow a wishy-washy leader. You got to be decisive, but to be decisive, you have to learn to be fearless of what the impact will be. Because if one is always afraid of, well, what if, and you don't make a decision, then it's hard to have people follow you because you come across wishy-washy. So learning to be fearless, learning to make decisions, and just constantly moving forward and learning. If you make a mistake, learn from it.
It's okay.
And
yeah,
it's okay.
I first learned the decision, just for a quick tangent, the decision, importance of making a decision as a consultant, a management consultant. And it was my boss. We were out to dinner. We were often traveling. And he looked at me and he said, if I teach you one thing about being a good business person, it's that you have to learn how to order within 20 seconds and look at a menu and make a decision. He said, you will thank me forever for this lesson. And I have the ability now. I can look at a menu and just, it's so funny what sticks with you, but it is that idea of just just go with it, right? It's like you got to stand by it and you can order something else next time. Yeah. But being able to
two
make a quick
questions.
decision.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mention that because there's two questions I ask almost every client when they're struggling. And I say, when you go out to dinner, how long does it take you to figure out what you're going to eat? Just what you said. And the second one is, when your significant other or friend says, where do you want to go eat? How do you answer? And if they say, I don't care, go ahead, you decide, I almost always call them out on that. And I say, why do you do it? And what it comes down to, some people, well, it just doesn't matter to me. If it doesn't matter, give your opinion. Because they can always, like, Olivia, if you said to me, David, where do you want to go eat? Look, I want steak tonight. Well, David, I'm not really feeling like steak. Okay. What do you feel like?
Yeah.
So tell me which one. But the deferral here, it's a habit, it's a pattern in many people. And it's one of the first things I ask is, that deferral is fear of being wrong. It's fear of being judged. It is fear of, what if I make a recommendation and then you don't like it? Then it's all about ego. And the best leaders, it doesn't mean they're not compassionate. It doesn't mean they're not empathetic, but they're decisive. And I love the example. And it's exactly what I tell all my clients. When you go eat, one of my clients was so funny. They went to Hawaii and I go, your goal this whole trip, you decide immediately on the menu. And I said, if your spouse says to you, what do you want to do? Where do you want to eat? You cannot say, I don't care.
Yeah.
You decide.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
It is so, it's a great way to practice. That's it. That's
what it is. Building the habit, building the muscle. All right. As we come to a close, one of the things that I have learned over the years is people always ask the same questions of me, and sometimes in the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't really talk about this a lot and people don't ask me, but it would be fun if someone would ask me, this question I never get asked. So the question, what is one question that you rarely get asked or you rarely talk about, but you wish people would ask you, but maybe they don't know to ask you?
Such a good question. And I think one thing that I spent a lot of my time working on was learning Mandarin Chinese. And I don't use it today in my business or in my personal life at all. And I spent time over in China. I lived in Hangzhou for almost 8 months and I went to Middlebury College for my university, where I studied every day. They have a very intense and incredible language program. And so what I would talk about is, where did I use it? And so one of my first jobs, a side job when I was out of school, I was hired by an animal rights organization to be an undercover, I'll call it investigator, for them, going to little Chinese pharmacies in San Francisco and buying medicines to try to help stop. The big campaign was trying to help stop the farming of bears for their bear bile. And so this was, and the reason why I bring it up, because it's like I was able to use that language, but it also reminds me that, we talked about languages and growing up in a dual language household, a bilingual household. The parting thought is this. I feel so grateful that I have been exposed to and learned a lot of different languages, and we forget that languages is not just speaking to somebody in a different country and culture, but that there are these micro body languages and even languages, ways of interacting that we forget. And when you're going to like an interview or something I always suggest to people is make sure you understand the language of that company, for example, because they might use words that are different for the same thing that you might use a different word. And if you speak their language, your probability of success will just increase so much. So I went a little convoluted there, but I think just how I learned Mandarin. I think personally, I felt like I spent so much time there devoted to it, and I hope it comes back in my life some way. But for now, it is a good reminder for myself of just like, hey, it's not all lost. I have this framework of languages and how it's helped me have empathy for finding common ground with others.
Love that. I love that. So as we come to an end here, if someone wants to learn more, they want to get a toilet seat.
Please do.
They want
Yeah.
to, what is the best way for people to reach out, learn more, etc.?
Yeah. Come learn more at our website, www.casanacare.com. So CASANACARE.com. It's Casa. Our name Casana is the root of casa, the home, and sana, the Latin root for health. So health at home is what we're hoping to transform. So yeah, come visit us and get in touch through there. We look forward to hearing from you.
Fantastic. Well, it has been so much fun to talk to you, Olivia. Thank you so
Likewise.
much for being on the show.
Thank
I
you for
appreciate
having
it.
me. I really had a good time. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. So, folks, thank you for listening to Inside the Leader's Mind. I'm David Susan, and we'll see you next time. Take care.